When my husband died, a woman I'd never seen slipped something into my hand at his funeral and whispered, "He wanted you to see this. Don't tell anyone, especially not your stepchildren." When I finally plugged it in, I froze at what appeared on screen, my dead husband's face, staring directly at me saying, "Emma, if you're watching this, it means something has happened. Not something natural. Something caused." I'm glad you're here. Follow my story to the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far the truth can travel. I never imagined that after 12 years of marriage to Matthew, I would sit at his funeral feeling like an intruder in my own grief. But there I was, seated in the front pew of the church, while my stepchildren Grace and Harrison orchestrated every detail as if I were simply a guest who needed managing. "You're grieving. Let us handle everything," Grace had told me that morning, in that syrupy voice she'd perfected over the years. Harrison nodded beside her, his expression unreadable but somehow triumphant. I stayed quiet because I didn't have the strength to argue. Matthew had died just 4 days earlier. A sudden brain aneurysm, the doctor said. One moment he was laughing with me over burnt toast in our kitchen. The next, I found him collapsed beside the counter, his coffee cup shattered on the floor. I watched people file into the church. Matthew's co-workers, neighbors, relatives I hadn't seen in years. Everyone approached Grace and Harrison with their condolences, as if they were the bereaved spouses. I was just the second wife, the woman of 57 who needed to be shielded from complicated decisions. "Emma's too emotional right now," I heard Grace whisper to someone. "Harrison and I are managing everything." Emotional. That word stung worse than any empty sympathy. Matthew never treated me as emotional. To him, I was Emma, his partner, his equal, his fierce protector. But ever since his children became adults, especially in this last year, everything had shifted. During the service, I noticed something unsettling. Grace seemed composed, too composed. Every time someone offered condolences, she responded with a practiced sadness that felt rehearsed, like an actress who'd memorized her lines. Harrison stood by the casket whispering sharply to his wife whenever they glanced my way. That's when it happened. A woman I'd never seen before, dark hair, expensive perfume, eyes that held a warning, brushed past me in the crowded aisle. Her hand moved so quickly I almost didn't feel it. Something small and hard pressed into my palm. A USB drive. She leaned close, her breath warm against my ear. "He wanted you to see this. Don't tell anyone, especially not your stepchildren. You could be in danger." Before I could respond, she vanished into the crowd like smoke. I stared at the tiny black device hidden in my fist, my heart hammering against my ribs. Matthew had been dead for 4 days. How could he have wanted me to see anything? The funeral ended in a blur of hymns I couldn't hear and prayers I couldn't process. Grace approached me immediately, her hand gripping my elbow. "We need to meet with Dad's attorney tonight," she said, her tone leaving no room for discussion. "There's important paperwork. Please don't be late." It was the same voice she'd used with a forgetful child. I nodded mechanically, but my mind was elsewhere, on the USB burning a hole in my closed palm, on the stranger's warning echoing in my head. You could be in danger. After the burial, people gathered at our home. Well, what used to be our home. Now, Grace and Harrison moved through it as if they'd already inherited it, directing caterers, accepting casseroles, receiving guests. Grace glided through the living room like she owned it. Harrison stood by Matthew's antique liquor cabinet, pouring himself expensive scotch without asking permission. I sat in the armchair by the window, the USB drive hidden in my pocket, when I heard Harrison mutter to his sister in the hallway, "We need to get her signature before she figures anything out." My blood turned to ice. Before I could process what I'd heard, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. A text message appeared. "Do not sign anything tonight. Plug in the USB when you're alone. He knew what they were planning." The room tilted. Someone was watching. Someone knew. Someone was trying to protect me. And someone else, the two people currently standing in my dead husband's house, might be planning something far more sinister than I'd ever imagined. That night, after everyone left and Grace and Harrison finally drove away with promises to pick me up for the attorney meeting, I locked myself in Matthew's study. My hands trembled as I pushed the USB into his old laptop. A single file appeared on the black screen. For Emma, if anything happens to me. My heart nearly stopped. I clicked play. Matthew's face filled the screen. My Matthew, sitting at his office desk, looking older than I remembered, exhausted in a way I'd never seen. His voice was steady, but edged with fear. "Emma," he began, and I could hear the weight in every syllable. "If you're watching this, it means something has happened to me. Not something natural, something caused." I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from crying out. He leaned toward the camera, his eyes sharp and urgent. "My children, Grace and Harrison. They've been pressuring me for months to sign over power of attorney. They want access to the company accounts. They want the house. They want everything we built together." Tears blurred my vision. "I refused them, Emma. And since then," he swallowed hard, "strange things have been happening. My brakes were tampered with last month, twice. The doctors say my blood pressure is dangerously high, but I haven't felt any symptoms. I think—" his voice cracked. "I think someone has been putting something in my food." The room spun around me. "If I die suddenly," Matthew said, his eyes glistening, "it's not an accident. Take this video to the police. And Emma—" he leaned even closer, as if he could reach through the screen to protect me. "Protect yourself. Don't trust anyone, especially not them." The video ended. I sat frozen in the dark study, unable to breathe, unable to think. Matthew hadn't just feared his children. He believed they were trying to kill him, and now I had to figure out if he'd been right, before they decided I knew too much. I sat frozen in Matthew's desk chair, staring at the black screen where his face had been just seconds before. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady them. Something caused. The words echoed in my head like a scream I couldn't release. Matthew believed his own children were trying to kill him, and now he was dead. I reached for the laptop to replay the video, needing to hear his voice again, needing to prove to myself this wasn't some grief-induced hallucination, when the screen suddenly flickered back to life. A new window opened automatically. A folder labeled Evidence Do Not Delete appeared, and inside it, dozens of files began populating the screen. PDFs, audio recordings, photographs, spreadsheets. My cursor hovered over the first document, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I clicked. It was a bank statement, Matthew's personal account. Someone had highlighted multiple withdrawals over the past 6 months, each one for exactly $10,500. In the margin, Matthew had written in his distinctive handwriting, "I didn't authorize these. Asked Grace about it. She said she borrowed money for emergencies. Refused to say what kind." My stomach twisted. $2,500 over and over. I counted quickly, nearly $30,000 total. I opened the next file, a photograph of a document I'd never seen before. It was a revised will, dated 3 months ago, that left everything, the house, Matthew's pension, his life insurance, to Grace and Harrison, with a small monthly allowance designated for me for living expenses in an assisted care facility. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Assisted care facility. They'd been planning this, planning to take everything and warehouse me somewhere I couldn't interfere. The next file was an audio recording. My finger hesitated over the play button, but I forced myself to click it. Grace's voice filled the study, sharp and irritated. "Dad, you're being completely unreasonable. We're not trying to take anything from you. We're trying to protect what you've built. Emma's sweet, but she doesn't understand finances. If something happens to you, she'll be completely lost." Matthew's voice, tired but firm. "Emma is perfectly capable." "Is she, though?" That was Harrison now, his tone colder than his sister's. "Last week she couldn't remember where she'd parked the car. Mom used to do that before her diagnosis." "Your mother had Alzheimer's," Matthew said, and I could hear the anger building in his voice. "Emma forgot where she parked once in a crowded mall. That's not the same thing." Not yet, Grace said softly, and something about her tone made my skin crawl. But Dad, memory issues run in families. And Emma's already 57. These things can start early. I stopped the recording, my breath coming in short gasps. They'd been planting seeds, making Matthew doubt me, making him think I was declining mentally, so that when they eventually pushed him to sign over power of attorney for my protection, it would seem reasonable. But Matthew had seen through it. I opened another file, this one a PDF of medical records. Matthew's blood work from 2 months ago showed dangerously elevated sodium levels and traces of something the doctor had flagged. Inconsistent with patient's reported diet and medication. Recommend investigation of possible external factors. In the margin, Matthew had written, Dr. Chen says someone might be adding salt tablets to my food. Grace has been helping Emma cook dinner 3 nights a week. My hand flew to my mouth. Grace had insisted on coming over to help with meals after Matthew mentioned he was trying to watch his blood pressure. She'd been so sweet about it, so concerned, bringing special herbs and seasonings she said would be heart-healthy. Had she been poisoning him? The next audio file was shorter, just 30 seconds, but it hit me like a physical blow. Harrison's voice, casual, almost bored. Look, if he won't sign willingly, we'll just have to wait. The doctor said his blood pressure's through the roof. A heart event or stroke wouldn't surprise anyone at this point. A woman's voice I didn't recognize. And the wife? Grace, unmistakable. Once he's gone, Emma will be too devastated to fight anything. She's weak. She'll sign whatever we put in front of her. Weak. I'd heard that word before. At the funeral, whispered to guests. But hearing it now, in this context, in a recording Matthew had made weeks before his death, it felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. They didn't just want Matthew's money. They wanted me erased, controlled, dismissed. I opened file after file, each one more damning than the last. Photographs of Matthew's car in the garage, showing cut brake lines that had been poorly repaired. Email screenshots where Harrison discussed accelerating the timeline with someone whose name was redacted. A prescription bottle for blood pressure medication Matthew had never taken, but that Grace had apparently told his doctor he was taking, leading to a dangerous medication interaction when they'd given him something at the hospital. Text messages between Grace and Harrison from the day before Matthew died. Grace, did you take care of it? Harrison, done. Should happen within 48 hours. Make sure you're there when Emma finds him. We need to control the narrative from the beginning. Grace, already planned. I'm making her breakfast Tuesday morning. I'll be in the kitchen when it happens. My vision went dark at the edges. Grace had been there. She'd been in our kitchen that morning, insisting on making French toast while Matthew and I had coffee. She'd watched him collapse. She'd watched me scream for help, and she'd known it was coming. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to breathe, trying to process the enormity of what I was seeing. Matthew had documented everything, every conversation, every suspicious incident, every manipulation. He'd built a case against his own children because he knew, somehow he knew, they were going to kill him. And he'd been right. A sound cut through my spiraling thoughts, sharp and unmistakable. Keys jingling in the front door lock. My blood turned to ice. I looked at the clock on the laptop, 10:47 p.m. Grace and Harrison had left hours ago. They shouldn't be back, unless they knew I'd found something. Unless whoever had been sending me those warning texts had also been watching the house. Unless they'd decided I already knew too much. The front door opened. Footsteps in the hallway. 2 sets, moving with purpose. Grace's voice drifted through the house, artificially cheerful. Emma, we brought you some chamomile tea. We thought you might need help sleeping. I stared at the laptop screen, at the overwhelming evidence of murder and conspiracy spread across dozens of files. Then I looked at the study door, unlocked, visible from the hallway. They were coming, and I was trapped. I had maybe 10 seconds. My hands moved on pure instinct, ejecting the USB, shoving it deep into my cardigan pocket, closing the laptop, killing the desk lamp. The study plunged into darkness just as I heard their footsteps reach the hallway. I pressed myself into Matthew's leather chair, forcing my breathing to slow, trying to look like a grieving widow who'd simply fallen asleep at her dead husband's desk, rather than a woman who'd just discovered evidence of murder. The study door opened. Light from the hallway spilled across the floor. "Emma?" Grace's voice was soft, concerned, perfectly calibrated. "Oh, sweetie, you're sitting in the dark." She flipped the light switch. I blinked against the sudden brightness, genuinely disoriented, which probably helped sell the performance. "I must have dozed off," I mumbled, rubbing my eyes. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard I was certain they could hear it. Harrison appeared behind his sister, holding a thermos and 2 mugs. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes swept the study with an intensity that made my stomach clench. "We were worried about you," he said. "You shouldn't be alone tonight." "You shouldn't be alive tonight," I thought, remembering his text message. "Done. Should happen within 48 hours. Grace moved closer, perching on the edge of Matthew's desk. Too close. Close enough that if she looked down, she might notice the laptop was warm. "Have you been going through Dad's things?" she asked gently. "I know it's hard, but Harrison and I can help with that. We know where everything is." I bet they did. "I was just sitting here," I said, keeping my voice shaky and small, the voice of a woman they'd already decided was weak. "Remembering." "Of course," Grace murmured, but her eyes were scanning the desk, the papers, the closed laptop. "Emma, honey, do you know the passwords to Dad's accounts? His email, his bank access? We'll need those to handle the estate." My fingers curled around the USB drive in my pocket. I don't think so. Matthew handled all that." "He never shared them with you?" Harrison sounded skeptical. He poured tea from the thermos into both mugs, the liquid steaming. "Even after 12 years of marriage?" Matthew was private about his business affairs. That much was true. What I didn't say was that he'd been private because he didn't want his children to know what he was documenting. Grace tilted her head, her expression shifting to something that might have looked like sympathy to someone who hadn't heard her call me weak on a recording. "Emma, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." She reached out and took my hand. Hers was cold. "Dad mentioned to us that you'd been having some memory issues lately, forgetting things, repeating stories. Is that true?" There it was, the setup. I looked at her, this woman who'd been methodically poisoning my husband while gaslighting both of us, and I forced tears into my eyes. It wasn't hard. I had plenty of real grief and rage to draw from. Sometimes I do forget where I put things," I whispered. "Is that bad? Am I sick?" I watched something flash in Grace's eyes. Satisfaction. No, sweetie. It's probably just stress and grief." She squeezed my hand. "But it's something we should monitor. Harrison and I have been talking, and we think it might be good for you to see a doctor, just to be safe." A doctor. Probably the same one who'd falsely diagnosed Matthew with high blood pressure. The same one who'd create a paper trail showing I was mentally incompetent. "Dad left some unfinished business," Harrison said abruptly, setting down the thermos. "Legal matters that need immediate attention. We need you to come with us to the attorney's office. Tonight." I blinked at him. "Tonight? It's almost 11. "The attorney is doing us a favor, staying late." Harrison's tone left no room for argument. "This really can't wait, Emma. There are creditors involved, time-sensitive documents. If we don't handle this now, we could lose everything Dad worked for." My phone buzzed in my other pocket. I pulled it out with trembling fingers, genuinely shaking now. The text was from that same unknown number. "Don't go unless you bring the USB. They'll corner you. Make an excuse. Now." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Harrison moved closer, trying to see what I was reading. "Who's texting you this late?" His voice had an edge now. I pressed my hand to my forehead, and I didn't have to fake the dizziness. The adrenaline crash was hitting me hard. "I feel faint." "Emma?" Grace stood quickly, but there was annoyance flickering beneath her concern. "I'm sorry, I gripped the armrest. "Everything is spinning. I think I need to lie down. Can we do the attorney tomorrow?" Please? Harrison and Grace exchanged a look, the same loaded glance I'd seen at the funeral, a whole conversation happening in the space of 3 seconds. Emma, this is really important, Harrison pressed. I know, I can't think straight right now. Please. I let my voice break. I just buried my husband today. Can it wait until morning? The silence stretched. I could feel them calculating, weighing their options. Finally, Grace sighed. Of course it can wait. You're exhausted and we're being insensitive. She helped me stand, her hand on my elbow feeling more like a restraint than support. Let's get you to bed. I can manage, I said, pulling away gently. You two should go home. It's late. Are you sure? Harrison asked, but he was already picking up the thermos. They wanted to leave, probably to regroup, to adjust their timeline now that I'd delayed them. I'm sure. Thank you for the tea. I hadn't touched a drop of it. Grace hugged me at the front door, and I felt her hands pat my pockets. Looking for something? The USB? My phone? Call us if you need anything, she said. Anything at all. We'll pick you up at 9 tomorrow morning, Harrison added. For the attorney, no excuses. I watched through the window as they drove away, waiting until their taillights disappeared before I moved. Then I ran back to the study, plugged in the laptop, and opened the evidence folder with shaking hands. The next file was a call recording dated 2 weeks before Matthew's death. I pressed play. Grace's voice. The doctor said we need to establish a pattern of cognitive decline. I've been documenting incidents, the parking lot thing, when she forgot our anniversary dinner, when she called Harrison by the wrong name. A male voice. And these incidents are real? Grace laughed. Does it matter? Once we get her declared incompetent, we'll have full control. She'll be in a facility within a month of Dad's death. I opened the next file, medical records with my name on them, records I'd never authorized, a diagnosis of early-stage dementia with concerning memory deficits from a doctor I'd never met. The date, 3 days ago, before Matthew was even buried. They'd already started the paperwork to have me declared mentally unfit. The final file was a bank statement showing 3 transfers from Matthew's account to someone named Derek Moss, $15,000 total. I did a quick search on the laptop. Derek Moss, convicted of insurance fraud and medical malpractice. License revoked in 2019. He was the doctor, the one creating false diagnoses, the one they'd paid to build a case against Matthew, and now against me. My phone buzzed again. They're planning to take you tomorrow. The attorney meeting is a trap. Don't go alone. I'm trying to help, but you need to trust me. I typed back with trembling fingers. Who are you? 3 dots appeared. Then, someone your husband trusted. Someone who has evidence they don't know exists. Stay alive until morning. I'll find you. The message ended. I sat in Matthew's study, surrounded by evidence of conspiracy and murder, and realized with crystalline clarity I had less than 10 hours before Grace and Harrison would try to finish what they'd started, and I had no idea who I could trust, except a dead man's warning and a stranger's cryptic texts. I didn't sleep. How could I? I sat in Matthew's study until dawn broke, reviewing file after file, each one more damning than the last. By the time pale light filtered through the curtains, I had memorized every detail, every forged document, every incriminating recording, every calculated lie. At 6:47 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. The same one that had been texting me. My hand hovered over the screen for 3 rings before I answered. Don't speak, a woman's voice said immediately. Just listen. Go to your back door. I'm in the garden. Come alone. And bring the USB. The line went dead. Every instinct screamed that this could be a trap. Grace and Harrison could have hired someone. This mysterious contact could be leading me into something worse. But Matthew had trusted someone enough to give them that USB drive. And right now, that dead man's judgment was all I had. I grabbed the USB from where I'd hidden it inside a tampon box in the bathroom, the one place I knew Grace would never look, and walked through the silent house to the back door. She was standing by Matthew's rose bushes, the same woman from the funeral. Up close, I could see she was younger than I'd initially thought, maybe 40, with sharp, intelligent eyes and the kind of posture that suggested military training. She wore dark jeans and a leather jacket, her hands visible and empty. "Mrs. Reeves," she said quietly, "I'm Marina Hale. I'm sorry we have to meet like this." "Who are you?" My voice came out stronger than I felt. "I was your husband's private security consultant." She pulled out a phone and showed me a photo. Marina and Matthew in what looked like a coffee shop, Matthew's face serious as he showed her documents. "He hired me 6 months ago when he started suspecting his children were planning something." My throat tightened. 6 months. Matthew had been living with this fear for half a year and I hadn't known. Why didn't he tell me? "He wanted to protect you. He thought if you didn't know what he was documenting, you'd be safer." Marina's expression softened. "He loved you very much, Mrs. Reeves. Everything he did was to make sure you'd have the evidence you needed if something happened to him." "The USB... I gave it to you at the funeral because Matthew made me promise that if anything happened to him suddenly, I would get it into your hands before Grace and Harrison could destroy his laptop or files." She glanced toward the house. "We don't have much time. They'll be here at 9, and they're not planning to take no for an answer today." "How do you know that?" Marina pulled out her phone again, tapping through to a message thread. "Because I've been monitoring their communications. Harrison texted someone last night. Emma's stalling. We move tomorrow morning whether she's ready or not." Ice flooded my veins. "Move? What does that mean?" "It means they've already arranged for a psychiatric evaluation at the attorney's office. A doctor, Derek Moss, the same one who created the false diagnosis, will be there. They're going to have you declared mentally incompetent on the spot and take immediate conservatorship." The garden tilted. I grabbed the back of a patio chair to steady myself. They can't just... They can if you sign the right paperwork while you're confused with grief. And once they have legal control, they'll have you committed to a memory care facility within the week." Marina's voice was hard. "Your husband knew this was their plan. That's why he documented everything." "But why? Why do they need the money so desperately?" Marina's jaw tightened. "Because they're drowning in debt. Grace owes over $200,000 to some very unpleasant people, gambling debts mostly. Harrison's investment firm is actually a Ponzi scheme that's about to collapse. They've been living on borrowed time and borrowed money for 2 years." She swiped to another photo, a bank statement showing Grace's account with a negative balance and multiple overdraft fees. "Matthew's estate is worth approximately $2.3 million, the house, his pension, his life insurance, his company shares. If they can get control before creditors come after them, they can pay off their debts and still have plenty left over. And if I refuse to give them control, they lose everything. Their creditors will seize their assets. Harrison will likely face fraud charges. Grace..." Marina paused. "Grace's gambling debts aren't with legitimate casinos, Mrs. Reeves. They're with people who don't accept payment plans." The implications settled over me like a shroud. They weren't just greedy. They were desperate, and desperate people did desperate things. "You said Matthew was meeting with prosecutors?" Marina nodded grimly. "He had an appointment scheduled for the Monday after he died. He was going to turn over everything, the evidence of financial manipulation, the suspected poisoning, the brake tampering. He wanted them investigated for attempted murder." My legs gave out. I sank into the patio chair, my vision blurring with tears. "They killed him," I whispered. "He was going to expose them, and they killed him. I believe so." Marina crouched beside me, her voice gentle now. The aneurysm was real, but aneurysms can be triggered. Extreme stress, elevated blood pressure, certain medications or substances. Matthew's autopsy showed dangerously high sodium levels and traces of a stimulant that shouldn't have been in his system. The things Grace was putting in his food. Yes. And the doctor who prescribed Matthew that blood pressure medication? Derek Moss. The same man who's going to declare you incompetent this morning. Marina's hand closed over mine. "They've been planning this for months, Mrs. Reeves. slowly poisoning your husband while building a case for your mental decline. When Matthew refused to cooperate, they accelerated the timeline. I looked up at her through my tears. Why are you helping me? Matthew must have paid you, but he's gone now. Something flickered in Marina's eyes. Grief, maybe, or regret. Your husband was a good man, one of the few truly decent people I've met in this line of work. He trusted me with the most important thing in his world, protecting you. She stood, pulling me up with her. I don't leave jobs unfinished, and I sure as hell don't let murderers win. What do? We finish what Matthew started. Marina's expression hardened into something fierce and determined. We take every piece of evidence he collected. We add what I've gathered. And we make sure Grace and Harrison pay for what they did. How? They're coming at 9. Then we have 2 hours to prepare. Marina checked her watch. I have contacts at the DA's office, people who owe me favors. We can get a detective here before your stepchildren arrive, but we need to make sure everything is documented properly. Can you access Matthew's laptop? I nodded, pulling the USB from my pocket. I have everything, all his files. Good. Marina started toward the house, then turned back. Mrs. Reeves, what we're about to do, confronting them with evidence, bringing in law enforcement, it's going to get ugly. They're going to say terrible things. They're going to accuse you of manipulating their father, of falsifying evidence, of being mentally unstable. Are you ready for that? I thought of Matthew, sitting at his desk, recording that video because he knew he was running out of time. I thought of his warning. Protect yourself. Don't trust them. I thought of the word weak, spoken with such contempt by the woman who'd poisoned my husband. I'm ready, I said, and meant it. Marina smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her. Then let's go to war. Marina's car was a nondescript gray sedan that screamed professional surveillance. We drove through the early morning streets in tense silence, the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. Matthew kept files at his office, Marina said, navigating toward the downtown financial district. Things he couldn't risk keeping at home where Grace and Harrison might find them. He gave me his spare security pass 2 weeks before he died. She handed me a laminated badge with Matthew's photo, Sassy. My throat constricted seeing his face, the smile that never quite reached his eyes in those final months. Now I knew why. They'll have security footage of us entering, I said. Good. We want a record that we were there legally, with proper access. Marina pulled into the parking garage beneath Sterling and Grant Financial. We're not stealing anything. We're recovering evidence that belongs to you as his widow. The building was nearly empty at 7:15 a.m. on a Saturday. Our footsteps echoed through the marble lobby as we rode the elevator to the 15th floor. Matthew's department, internal audit, occupied the northeast corner. His office was exactly as I remembered from the few times I'd visited. Neat, organized, professional. But Marina moved with purpose, heading straight for the credenza behind his desk. He showed me once, she murmured, running her fingers along the underside of the cabinet. There was a soft click, and a hidden drawer popped open. Inside was a manila envelope, thick with documents. My hands shook as I opened it. The first item was another USB drive, this one labeled Backup, Originals. Beneath it, a stack of printed photographs. My stomach lurched. The first photo showed Grace in a parking lot, leaning into the window of a car. The man inside was middle-aged, balding, with the kind of face that suggested a lifetime of bad decisions. The timestamp read, 3 months ago. That's Derek Moss, Marina confirmed, looking over my shoulder. The doctor. The next photo showed them inside what looked like a medical office. Grace was handing him an envelope. Cash, probably. Matthew had zoomed in enough that I could see the denomination. Hundreds. She was paying him, I whispered. For the false diagnoses, for the prescriptions, for whatever he needed to do to make Matthew's death look natural. Marina flipped through more photos. Your husband was meticulous. He documented every meeting. Beneath the photos was a handwritten note in Matthew's distinctive script. If you're reading this, Emma, it means I'm gone. There's more evidence in safety deposit box number 447 at First National Bank, downtown branch. The key is taped inside the spine of our wedding album, the blue one on the bedroom shelf. Trust Marina. She'll help you finish this. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't protect us both. Tears blurred the words. He'd known. He'd known he was running out of time, and he'd left me a roadmap to... "We need to move," Marina said, checking her watch. "Grace and Harrison will expect you home." The elevator dinged in the hallway. We both froze. Marina's hand went to something at her hip. A weapon, I realized with a jolt. She moved to the door silently, peering through the small window. Her expression went hard. "Harrison," she mouthed. My heart stopped. What was he doing here? At 7:30 on a Saturday morning? Marina grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a door I hadn't noticed, a connecting office that shared a wall with Matthew's. We slipped through just as I heard Harrison's voice in the hallway talking on his phone. "Don't care what she says. We're moving forward this morning. Yes, Moss will be there. Just have the paperwork ready." Through the crack in the door, I watched Harrison enter Matthew's office. He moved immediately to the desk, pulling out drawers, searching through files. He was looking for something specific, the hidden drawer. I pressed my hand over my mouth as Harrison ran his fingers along the credenza's underside, exactly where Marina had. But the drawer was already open, already empty. "Damn it," he muttered. Then, louder, "He moved it. The backup must be somewhere else." He knew. Harrison knew Matthew had been documenting everything, and he was trying to find the evidence before anyone else did. Marina tugged my sleeve, pointing toward the emergency exit at the end of the connecting office. We moved silently, painfully slowly, as Harrison ransacked Matthew's workspace. We were almost to the exit when my phone buzzed. The sound was barely audible, but in the silent office it might as well have been a gunshot. Harrison's head snapped up. "Who's there?" Marina shoved me through the exit door. We ran down the emergency stairs, our footsteps clattering on metal. Behind us, I heard the door slam open, heard Harrison's voice echoing down the stairwell. "Stop! Emma, I know that's you!" We burst out into the parking garage. Marina's car was 3 rows over. We ran, my lungs burning, my heart hammering against my ribs. The engine roared to life. Marina peeled out just as Harrison emerged from the stairwell, his face twisted with rage. "He saw us," I gasped. "Good," Marina said grimly, weaving through traffic. "Let him know you're not the helpless widow he thought you were." Back at Marina's apartment, a sparse, functional space that felt more like a safe house than a home, I plugged in the second USB with trembling hands. The files that opened made the first batch look tame. The first video was dated 4 months ago. Matthew had hidden a camera somewhere in the house, maybe the living room bookshelf, judging by the angle. Grace stood in the center of the frame, her face contorted with fury. "You're being selfish and stupid," she spat at someone off camera. Matthew, presumably. "We're your children. We deserve that money more than some woman you married in your old age." "Emma is my wife." Matthew's voice, tired but firm. "Emma is a gold digger who's been waiting for you to die since the day you met her." Grace's laugh was cruel. "Don't think we haven't seen the way she looks at your bank statements." I felt sick. I'd never even asked about Matthew's finances beyond our household budget. The next video was worse. It showed Harrison, filmed from a hidden camera in Matthew's home office, sitting at the computer at 2 a.m. Matthew must have installed motion-activated recording. Harrison's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing banking sites, transferring funds, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. The timestamp showed this happened dozens of times over 6 months. "He was robbing him," I whispered, while Matthew slept. The final video made me want to vomit. Grace and Harrison in what looked like a car, filmed through a windshield. Matthew must have left his phone recording on the dashboard. Their voices were muffled but audible. "Talk to Moss again," Grace was saying. "He says if we increase the dosage, Dad's blood pressure will spike high enough to trigger a cardiac event, maybe a stroke." "And it won't be traceable?" Harrison asked. "Not after a few days. It metabolizes quickly. Ma says it'll look completely natural, just an old man with a bad heart finally giving out. Harrison was quiet for a moment. Then, "And you're sure he won't sign over power of attorney voluntarily? I tried again yesterday. He refused. Said Emma would never forgive him." Grace's voice dripped with contempt. "So we make his condition worse, keep him stressed, keep his blood pressure elevated, keep adding the compounds to his food. Eventually, nature will take its course, and when it does, Emma will be too devastated to question anything." The video ended. I sat staring at the black screen, my whole body numb. They hadn't just planned Matthew's death. They'd discussed it, calibrated it, fine-tuned their murder like it was a business transaction. Marina's hand settled on my shoulder. "Now you know what we're dealing with." "They killed him," I said, my voice hollow. "They talked about it like they were planning a dinner party." "Yes." Marina's voice was steel. "And in 2 hours, they're planning to do the same thing to you, just more slowly. Locked away where you can't fight back." I looked up at her, feeling something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. "Then we make sure they never get the chance." The wedding album was exactly where Matthew said it would be, on the bedroom shelf, spine facing out, its blue leather cover faded from years of sun exposure. I pulled it down with trembling hands, feeling along the spine until my fingers found a small bump. The tape peeled away easily, revealing a small silver key. Marina checked her watch. "We have 45 minutes before they arrive at your house. The bank opens at 8. First National Bank's downtown branch was a fortress of marble and steel. The safety deposit vault was in the basement, accessed through multiple security doors. The attendant, a young woman with kind eyes, barely glanced at Matthew's death certificate and my ID before leading us down. Box number 447 was small, unassuming. The key turned smoothly. Inside was a thick manila envelope. My hands shook so badly that Marina had to help me carry it to the private viewing room. The attendant closed the door, leaving us alone. The first item was a letter, Matthew's handwriting covering 3 pages of cream-colored stationery. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true. I'm so sorry, my love. Sorry I wasn't strong enough to stop them. Sorry I couldn't protect you better. Sorry I had to leave you alone to fight this battle. But you're not alone. Marina will help you. Trust her completely. She's one of the few people in this world who can't be bought or intimidated." I've spent the last 6 months documenting everything Grace and Harrison have done. Every lie, every manipulation, every crime. It's all in these files. Take them to the police. Take them to prosecutors. Make sure my children pay for what they've done. I know this will hurt you, knowing that I suspected them for so long and didn't tell you. But Emma, I was trying to protect you. If they'd known you were aware of their plans, they would have moved against you sooner. I needed you safe while I gathered enough evidence to destroy them. The life insurance policy names you as sole beneficiary, $1.5 million. Grace and Harrison don't know this. I changed it 3 months ago after they first asked me to sign over power of attorney. They think they're the beneficiaries. Let them believe that until the very end. You are the strongest person I know. Even if you don't see it yourself, you are not weak. You are not fragile. You are a warrior, and I have loved you every single day since the moment I met you. Fight for us, Emma. Fight for the truth. All my love, always. Matthew. I pressed the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. Marina gave me a moment, then gently pulled the envelope closer. Inside were life insurance documents, exactly as Matthew had described. Emma Reeves, sole beneficiary, $1.5 million. The policy had been updated 3 months ago, signed and notarized. "They're going to lose their minds when they find out," Marina said quietly. Beneath the insurance papers were photographs, and these made my blood run cold. Matthew's car, jacked up in what looked like a mechanic's garage. The brake lines clearly visible and clearly cut. Not frayed, not worn. Cut clean through with something sharp. The second photo showed the same brake lines after they'd been repaired. A hasty welding job that would hold for a few days, maybe a week, before failing catastrophically. He documented both times. Marina said, examining the photos. He knew what they were doing, and he kept driving that car because stopping would have tipped them off that he was onto them. Matthew had risked his life to gather evidence. He'd lived with the knowledge that his own children were trying to kill him, and he'd kept playing the unsuspecting father so he could build an ironclad case against them. The final item was a small flash drive, labeled simply, Confession. Marina plugged it into her laptop. A single audio file appeared. Grace's voice filled the small room, crystal clear. "Look, Dad's stubborn. We've tried everything. Guilt, manipulation, bringing up Mom's memory. Nothing works. If he won't sign the power of attorney willingly, we'll have to help nature along." A man's voice. Derek Moss, I now recognized. "You understand what you're asking me to do? I'm asking you to prescribe medication that will interact badly with his blood pressure. I'm asking you to provide supplements that will stress his cardiovascular system. I'm asking you to create a medical record showing progressive cognitive decline." Grace's voice was cold, businesslike. "Can you do that or not?" "For the price we discussed, yes. But if this comes back on me..." "It won't. He's an old man with high blood pressure and a stressful job. When his heart gives out, it'll be tragic but not surprising. And once he's gone, Emma will be so grief-stricken she won't question anything. We'll have her signed over to a conservatorship within a month." "And the brother? He's on board?" "Harrison knows what needs to happen. He's handling the financial end, making sure we have access to everything the moment Dad dies. I'm handling the medical angle." A pause. "This is happening, Doctor. The only question is whether you want your cut or not." "I'm in." The recording ended. I sat frozen, staring at the laptop screen. This wasn't circumstantial evidence or suspicious behavior. This was a recorded conspiracy to commit murder. "This is enough," I whispered. "This is enough to put them away." "More than enough." Marina ejected the flash drive, handling it like the precious evidence it was. "But we need to be smart about how we use it. If we go to the police now, they'll lawyer up immediately. They'll claim the recordings are fabricated, that you're a grieving widow being manipulated, that Matthew was mentally unstable. So what do we do?" Marina's eyes glinted with something fierce and calculating. "We let them think they've won. You go to that attorney meeting. You act confused, grieving, overwhelmed, everything they expect. Let them push. Let them threaten. Let them show their true colors." She pulled out a small device from her bag, something that looked like a pen but clearly wasn't. "Recording device, audio and video, completely undetectable. Clip it to your collar, keep it pointed toward them. Capture everything they say, every threat, every manipulation. And when they think they've cornered you, when they're about to force you to sign away your life..." Marina smiled grimly. "That's when you hit them with the truth. They'll be furious, dangerous. That's why I'll be there. Not in the room. They can't know I'm involved, but close enough to intervene if things go wrong." She pressed the recording device into my hand. "You can do this, Mrs. Reeves. Your husband believed in you. I believe in you. Now you need to believe in yourself." I looked at the evidence spread across the table, the letter, the insurance policy, the photos, the recordings. Everything Matthew had risked his life to collect, everything he'd left behind to protect me. "When do we strike?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Marina checked her watch. "They'll be at your house in 20 minutes. We need to get you back, get you ready. Remember, you're the grieving widow. Confused, overwhelmed, not a threat." Her expression hardened. "Until the moment you destroy them." I gathered the evidence carefully, reverently. Matthew had given me the weapons. Marina had given me the strategy. Now all I had to do was find the courage to use them. "Let's finish this," I said. Marina grinned. "Now you sound like someone I'd follow into battle." We left the bank with Matthew's legacy secured in Marina's locked briefcase. As we drove back to my house, I could see Grace's car already parked in the driveway, waiting like a predator outside its prey's den. I took a deep breath, clipped the recording device to my collar, and prepared to give the performance of my life. The war was about to begin, and this time I wasn't going to be the victim. The law offices of Brennan and Associates occupied the top floor of a sleek glass building downtown. I arrived at exactly 9:00 a.m., my hand steady despite the recording device clipped to my collar and the USB drives hidden in my purse. Marina had dropped me off 2 blocks away. "I'll be in the coffee shop across the street," she'd said, handing me her phone number on a card. "Any sign of trouble, you text me one word. Help. I'll have police there in 3 minutes." Grace and Harrison were already in the conference room when the receptionist led me in. They sat on one side of a massive mahogany table, both dressed in dark, formal attire that made them look like they were attending another funeral. Mine, probably. "Emma," Grace stood, coming around to embrace me. Her perfume was cloying, suffocating. "We're so glad you made it. We were worried after last night." "I'm fine," I said softly, letting my voice waver just slightly. "Just tired." The attorney, a thin man in his 50s named Richard Brennan, gestured to a chair across from Grace and Harrison. "Mrs. Reeves, thank you for coming. I understand this is a difficult time." "It is," I murmured, settling into the leather chair. Through the window behind Brennan's head, I could see the coffee shop where Marina waited. Brennan opened a folder, spreading documents across the table. "Your husband's affairs are, fortunately, quite straightforward. However, there are some time-sensitive matters that require immediate attention." "What kind of matters?" I asked, playing confused. Harrison leaned forward, his expression perfectly calibrated to look concerned. "Dad had some outstanding business obligations, Emma. Contracts that need to be honored, accounts that need managing. We need to act quickly to protect the estate." "Protect it from what?" Grace's smile was patient, condescending. "From creditors? From legal complications. Dad's company's shares need to be transferred properly. The house needs to be secured. These things are complicated and, frankly," she glanced at Harrison, "Dad mentioned to us that you'd been having some trouble with memory lately. Forgetting appointments, getting confused about dates." The recording device captured every word. Sometimes I do forget things," I said, letting my voice crack slightly. "Of course you do," Grace soothed. "It's perfectly natural, especially with grief. That's why Harrison and I think it's best if we handle the complex legal matters. We just need you to sign a few documents." Brennan slid a stack of papers toward me. "This is a limited power of attorney, granting your stepchildren authority to manage certain aspects of the estate on your behalf." I picked up the document, scanning the dense legal language. Buried in the clauses were provisions granting Grace and Harrison control over all financial accounts, property decisions, including the right to sell the house, medical decisions regarding my care, access to life insurance proceeds, control over Matthew's company shares, and pension, everything. They wanted everything. "This says they can make medical decisions for me," I said slowly, pointing to the clause. "Only if necessary," Harrison said smoothly. "It's a precaution. If you were to become ill or incapacitated, we'd be able to make sure you got the best care." "Like a nursing home?" Grace's mask slipped for just a second, a flash of irritation. "An assisted living facility if it became necessary, but that's far in the future. This is just about protecting you." "Dad would want us to take care of you," Harrison added. "He was very specific about that. He told us you were too emotional to understand the financial complexities." There it was, recorded. The lie they'd built their entire case on. Brennan handed me a pen. "If you'll just sign at the bottom of each page." "Before I sign," I said, my hand trembling as I reached into my purse, "I think there's something we should all watch together." I pulled out the USB drive and placed it on the table. The room went very still. "What is that?" Grace's voice had gone sharp. "Something Matthew left for me." I looked at Brennan. "Do you have a laptop we could use?" Brennan glanced between me and the stepchildren, clearly sensing tension. Yes, of course." He retrieved a laptop from his desk, setting it up at the head of the table. I plugged in the USB with steady hands, steadier than I'd expected. Matthew's face appeared on the screen. Grace lunged forward. "Emma, what are you—" I think we should all hear what Matthew wanted to say, I interrupted, my voice no longer weak, no longer confused. I hit play. Emma, Matthew's voice filled the conference room. If you're watching this, it means something has happened to me. Not something natural, something caused. Harrison's face went white. My children, Grace and Harrison. They've been pressuring me for months to sign over power of attorney. They want access to the company accounts. They want the house. They want everything we built together. Turn it off, Grace hissed, reaching for the laptop. I blocked her hand. Mr. Brennan, I think you need to see this. I refused them, Matthew continued on screen, and since then, strange things have been happening. My brakes were tampered with last month, twice. The doctors say my blood pressure is dangerously high, but I haven't felt any symptoms. I think someone has been putting something in my food. Brennan had gone very pale. He sank into his chair, eyes fixed on the screen. If I die suddenly, it's not an accident. Take this video to the police. And Emma, protect yourself. Don't trust anyone, especially not them. The video ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Then chaos erupted. This is fabricated, Harrison said, standing so quickly his chair toppled backward. She's manipulated these files. There's more, I said calmly, clicking to the next file. Would you like to hear the recording of Grace paying Dr. Derek Moss to create false medical diagnoses? Or maybe the video of Harrison accessing Matthew's bank accounts at 2 a.m.? Or perhaps... Grace made a grab for the laptop. I yanked it away, clutching it to my chest. "Give me that!" she screamed, her carefully constructed mask completely shattered. "You have no idea what you're doing, you stupid—" "Mr. Brennan," I said, my voice cutting through her fury. "I believe you need to call the police. I have evidence that my husband was murdered, and that these two people are attempting to defraud his estate." Brennan's hand was already reaching for his phone. "Security first, I think." Harrison moved toward the door, but it burst open before he could reach it. 2 security guards filled the doorway, summoned by Brennan's assistant, who'd been listening through the intercom. "No one leaves," Brennan said, his voice shaking but firm. "I'm calling the authorities." "You can't do this," Grace said, her voice rising to a shriek. "That evidence is illegally obtained. It's your voice, isn't it?" I asked quietly. "On those recordings? Discussing how to poison Matthew? Planning to have me declared incompetent?" She stared at me with pure hatred. "You were supposed to be weak, fragile, easy." "I know," I said. "That's what you counted on. That's what got Matthew killed. Your assumption that neither of us would fight back." Harrison tried one more time to reach the laptop, but the security guards blocked him. Through the window, I could see police cars pulling up to the building, lights flashing. Marina must have called them the moment I'd texted her. "It's happening." Brennan had the phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapidly to what sounded like a detective. Grace had collapsed into her chair, shaking with rage or fear. I couldn't tell which. Harrison stood frozen, watching his carefully constructed plan crumble into dust. "Matthew left me everything," I said, looking at both of them. "The life insurance, the house, the accounts. He changed his will 3 months ago when you first asked him to sign over power of attorney. You never had a claim to any of it." Grace's face crumpled. "We needed that money. We needed it." "So you killed him for it." The sirens were getting closer now. I could hear them through the thick glass windows, the sound of justice finally arriving. "Mrs. Reeves," Brennan said shakily, "I think you should wait in my office while the police take your statement." I stood, clutching the laptop with all of Matthew's evidence, and walked past Grace and Harrison without looking at them. Behind me, I heard Grace start to sob, not with grief, but with the sound of someone watching their entire world collapse. The police arrived 3 minutes later, and I told them everything. The police investigation moved with a speed that surprised even Marina. Detective Sarah Chen arrived at the law office within 20 minutes, flanked by 2 uniformed officers and a forensics team. She was a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. "Mrs. Reeves," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "I understand you have evidence of a crime." I handed her the laptop. Still open to Matthew's video confession. I have evidence of a murder. The next 72 hours were a blur of police stations, evidence logs, and formal statements. Detective Chen's team worked around the clock. They seized Matthew's car from the impound lot where it had been stored after his death, and forensics confirmed what the photographs had shown. The brake lines had been cleanly severed, then hastily repaired with welding that would have failed catastrophically within days. Your husband was lucky he didn't die in a car accident first, Chen told me grimly. These cuts were deliberate, professional. Someone knew exactly where to strike. They searched Matthew's kitchen and found traces of a substance called pseudoephedrine mixed with high-sodium compounds hidden in a canister labeled Heart-Healthy Seasoning Blend, the same canister Grace had brought over for our healthy meals together. This combination would have caused extreme blood pressure spikes, the forensics expert explained, especially in someone who was already being given medication that interacted badly with stimulants. Over time, it would create the perfect conditions for a stroke or aneurysm. The medical examiner revised Matthew's cause of death from natural causes to suspicious circumstances pending investigation. Dr. Derek Moss was arrested at his unlicensed clinic on the second day. His records showed he'd created false diagnoses for both Matthew and me, documenting cognitive decline that had never occurred and prescribing medications that would have dangerously elevated Matthew's blood pressure. When confronted with Grace's recorded voice paying him to help nature along, he immediately offered to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. Grace Harrison approached me 6 months ago, he testified. She wanted documentation showing her father was declining mentally and physically. She paid me $15,000 to create a medical record that would support a conservatorship petition. The bank fraud was perhaps the easiest to prove. Harrison had transferred over $47,000 from Matthew's accounts to offshore holdings over 8 months. The digital trail was damning. Timestamps showing the transfers occurring at 2 a.m., IP addresses matching Harrison's home computer, even security footage from Matthew's home office showing Harrison at the computer during those exact times. Grace and Harrison were arrested on the third day. I watched from behind one-way glass as they were brought in separately for questioning. Grace was crying, her makeup smeared, her hands shaking. Harrison was stone-faced, already asking for his lawyer. Marina stood beside me, her arms crossed. "This is it. Everything your husband worked for." Detective Chen joined us. "Mrs. Reeves, we have enough to charge them with financial exploitation, medical fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted coercion. The DA is also considering charges of criminally negligent homicide, possibly even manslaughter." "Will they go to prison?" I asked. "If I have anything to say about it." For a very long time. The trial took place 8 months later. The prosecution built their case on Matthew's evidence. Every video, every recording, every document he'd meticulously collected and preserved. The lead prosecutor, a fierce woman named Janet Morales, called Matthew a man who documented his own murder because he knew the system would need proof to believe his own children capable of such evil. I testified on the 4th day. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, legal observers, people who'd read about the case and wanted to see justice served. I wore the navy blue suit Matthew had always loved and spoke clearly into the microphone. Matthew was terrified, I told the jury. But he was also determined. He knew that if something happened to him, I would need evidence, not suspicions, not theories, concrete, undeniable proof. So he gave me that. He spent the last 6 months of his life building a case against the people who should have loved him most. I saw 2 jurors wipe their eyes. Grace's attorney tried to paint me as a manipulative second wife who'd fabricated evidence to steal an inheritance. But when the prosecutor played the recording of Grace's voice, "If he won't sign, we'll help nature along," the defense crumbled. Grace broke on the witness stand. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she sobbed, mascara streaming down her face. "Harrison said we'd just scare him a little, make him think he was getting sick so he'd sign the papers. I didn't know Harrison was actually going to—" "Objection!" Harrison's attorney was on his feet. "My client has not been accused of—" But the damage was done. Grace had just blamed her brother for escalating the plan, and the jury heard every word. Harrison took the stand the next day and tried a different strategy. Matthew had fabricated everything. The videos were deepfakes. The recordings were edited. Matthew had been mentally unstable, paranoid, and Emma had exploited that paranoia to frame his innocent children. My father was not himself in his final months, Harrison claimed, his voice steady and convincing. He became obsessed with conspiracy theories, convinced everyone was out to get him. This so-called evidence is the product of a sick man's delusions. The prosecutor smiled. Mr. Harrison, are you claiming the bank transfers from your father's account to your offshore holdings are also fabrications? Harrison's face went blank. Are you claiming the video footage of you accessing his computer at 2 a.m. is fabricated? I was helping him with, are you claiming the recording of your sister paying Dr. Moss is edited? Harrison had no answer. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Grace was convicted of conspiracy to commit fraud, medical fraud, financial exploitation, and criminally negligent homicide. The judge sentenced her to 18 years in prison. Harrison received 22 years for the same charges, plus aggravated fraud and evidence tampering. Dr. Derek Moss, in exchange for his cooperation, received 8 years. I was in the courtroom when the verdicts were read. Grace sobbed openly, her face buried in her hands. Harrison sat perfectly still, his expression blank, as if he couldn't quite process that his carefully constructed plan had resulted in 2 decades behind bars. As the bailiffs led them away, Grace turned to look at me one final time. Her eyes held something I couldn't quite identify, regret, maybe, or just the dawning realization of everything she'd destroyed. I held her gaze and didn't look away. This was for Matthew, for every moment of fear he'd lived through, for every time he'd questioned whether his own children were capable of murder and had the answer confirmed, for the life we should have had together, stolen by greed and cruelty. Detective Chen found me in the hallway afterward. Your husband would be proud of you. He did all the hard work, I said. I just finished what he started. No, Marina said, appearing beside me. You fought when it would have been easier to surrender. You stood up when they expected you to fall. That's all you, Emma. I looked at both women, the detective who'd believed me and the bodyguard who'd protected me, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Justice hadn't brought Matthew back, but it had honored his memory and ensured his children would pay for what they'd done. And sometimes that had to be enough. 9 months after the trial, I stood in the garden of the lakeside cottage Matthew and I had dreamed about, but never got to share. The cottage was small, just 2 bedrooms, a cozy kitchen with windows overlooking the water, and a wraparound porch where I could watch the sun rise over the lake each morning. Matthew had shown me the listing 3 years ago, his eyes lighting up as he scrolled through the photos on his phone. When I retire, he'd said, pulling me close, this is where we'll go. Just you and me, Emma. Peace and quiet and all the time in the world. We'd never made it here together, but I'd made it for both of us. I knelt in the garden bed, my hands deep in the rich soil, planting the last of Matthew's favorite flowers, deep purple irises that would bloom in the spring. He'd always said they reminded him of my eyes when the light hit them just right. The physical work felt good, grounding, real. For months after the trial, I'd felt unmoored, floating through days that blurred together in a haze of legal paperwork, insurance claims, and the hollow echo of a house that held too many ghosts. The house where Matthew died, the house where Grace and Harrison had plotted his murder. The house I could no longer bear to live in, so I'd sold it. Used part of the life insurance money to buy this cottage outright, and donated the rest to organizations that helped victims of financial exploitation and elder abuse. Matthew would have approved. The garden was beginning to take shape now, roses along the fence, lavender near the porch steps, and a small vegetable plot where I grew tomatoes and herbs. Simple things, healing things. I pressed the last iris bulb into the earth and sat back on my heels, wiping soil from my hands. You're getting good at this, a familiar voice called from the driveway. I turned to see Marina walking toward me, carrying a bakery box and 2 cups of coffee. She'd become a regular visitor over the past months, no longer my bodyguard or my investigator, but simply my friend. "I had a good teacher," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Matthew had been an amateur gardener, spending weekend mornings tending to his roses and talking to his plants like they were old friends. Marina settled onto the porch steps beside me, opening the bakery box to reveal chocolate croissants, my weakness. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching a pair of ducks glide across the lake's glassy surface. "How are you really doing?" Marina asked finally, her tone gentle but direct. She'd never been one for small talk. I considered the question, really considered it, rather than offering the automatic, "I'm fine," that had become my default response to everyone else. "Some days are better than others," I admitted. I still reach for my phone sometimes to call Matthew, to tell him about something funny I saw, or to ask his opinion about dinner. And then I remember. Marina nodded, understanding in her eyes. "But then I come out here," I continued, gesturing to the lake, the garden, the cottage that was slowly becoming home. "And I remember that I survived, that I fought back, that I didn't let them erase me the way they erased him." "Matthew would be proud of you," Marina said softly. "I hope so." I took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth spread through me. "I'm starting to think he'd want me to do more than just survive, though. He'd want me to actually live." Marina smiled. "So, what does that look like?" I'd been asking myself the same question for weeks. What did life after justice look like? What did healing look like when the wounds were so deep? "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But I'm figuring it out, one day at a time." We talked for another hour, about Marina's latest security contract, about the book I was reading, about nothing and everything, normal things, the kind of conversations I'd been starved for during those dark months when every interaction felt weighted with suspicion and fear. After Marina left, I walked back inside to check the mail. The mailbox at the end of the drive had become a daily ritual, something ordinary and predictable in a life that had been anything but. Most days it was bills, catalogs, the occasional sympathy card from people who'd only just heard about Matthew's death. But today, there was a letter that made my blood run cold. The return address was from the Women's Correctional Facility where Grace was serving her sentence. My hands trembled as I opened it, my heart hammering against my ribs. Part of me wanted to throw it away unread, but I'd spent too many months hiding from truth to start now. The letter was 3 pages long, written in Grace's distinctive, flowing handwriting. "Dear Emma, I know I have no right to write to you, no right to ask for your time or attention. But I've spent 9 months in this place thinking about what I did, and I need you to know that I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking clearly. The debt, the pressure, the fear of losing everything, it clouded my judgment. Harrison and I convinced ourselves we were doing what was necessary, what Dad would have wanted if he'd understood how desperate our situation was. I never meant for it to go so far. I never meant for him to die. I know you probably don't believe me. I know you think I'm a monster, but I loved my father, Emma. In my own way I did, and I'm sorry for what I took from you. Sorry for the pain I caused. Sorry for not being strong enough to find another way. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve that. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry, that I think about what I did every single day, that if I could go back and change things, I would. Grace." I read the letter 3 times, searching for something. Accountability, genuine remorse, the sister-in-law I'd thought I knew before everything shattered. But all I found were excuses wrapped in apologies. I wasn't thinking clearly. The pressure clouded my judgment. I never meant for it to go so far. Never once did she write, "I chose to poison him. I chose to plot his death. I chose greed over love." I walked out to the porch, the letter still in my hand, and stared across the lake as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. The water reflected the sky in shades of gold and pink, beautiful and peaceful. Grace wanted forgiveness. She wanted me to absolve her, to tell her that I understood, that the circumstances had somehow justified the unforgivable. But healing wasn't about returning to what had hurt me. It wasn't about letting my abusers back in, even through letters and carefully worded apologies. Healing was standing here, in this cottage Matthew had dreamed of, planting gardens he would have loved, building a life from the ashes of the one they'd destroyed. Healing was choosing peace over poison. I tore the letter into small pieces and let them fall into the kitchen trash. Grace could live with her choices. I would live with mine. Later that evening, as twilight settled over the lake, I retrieved the USB drive from the locked drawer in Matthew's desk. The desk I'd moved here from his office, the one piece of our old life I couldn't bear to part with. I held it in my palm, this tiny device that contained the truth Matthew had risked everything to preserve. His voice, his evidence, his love. "Thank you," I whispered to the memory of my husband, to the man who'd protected me even in death. "Thank you for leaving me the truth. Thank you for believing I was strong enough to use it." The USB glinted in the fading light, and I felt something shift inside me, not the sharp pain of grief, but something gentler, gratitude, for the 12 years we'd had together, for the battle he'd helped me win, for the life I was learning to build without him. I was 57 years old, and I was still here. Still standing, still fighting, and that was enough. If this story touched your heart, please tell me where you're watching from. Your comments warm my soul more than you know. And before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so more people can hear stories like this.